The Senate chamber sits empty ahead of next week's resumption of the session in Ottawa on September 12, 2014. Lawyers for the Senate appear before an Ottawa judge this morning to argue that Sen. Mike Duffy can't sue the upper chamber over his suspension without pay 5 years ago. Duffy is seeking more than $7.8 million in damages from the Senate and the RCMP in the wake of the high-profile investigation into his expense claims, which culminated in a trial where he was acquitted on 31 charges in April 2016. Adrian Wild, The Canadian Press. 7 stories in the news for Wednesday, June 27. Senate asks to be stricken from Duffy lawsuit. Lawyers for the Senate appear before an Ottawa judge this morning to argue that Sen. Mike Duffy can't sue the upper chamber over his suspension without pay 5 years ago. Duffy is seeking more than $7.8 million in damages from the Senate and the RCMP in the wake of the high-profile investigation into his expense claims, which culminated in a trial where he was acquitted on 31 charges in April 2016. South Korea resuming Canadian wheat imports. The Alberta Wheat Commission says South Korea has resumed imports of Canadian wheat after suspending trade last week over concerns about a small number of genetically modified plants. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency said earlier this month that a few GM wheat plants were found near a farm in Alberta, prompting South Korea and Japan to halt their purchases. The Commission says tests proved there is no evidence of GM wheat in commercial shipments and is confident Japan will also soon resume imports. BC. To release money laundering reportBC. Attorney General David Eby is expected to release an independent report today that examines money laundering in the province's gambling industry. Former RCMP Deputy Commissioner Peter German was appointed to conduct a review after a Vancouver area casino accepted $13.5 million in $20 bills over a one-month period in 2015, with police saying it could be proceeds of crime. Mother daughter dead after apparent drowning at resort. Provincial police in Ontario are expected to shed more light on the apparent drowning deaths of a mother and her daughter at a resort north of Toronto near Collingwood, ONT. Police says officers were called to the Mountain Springs Resort on Tuesday evening at about 7:30 p.m. The mother and daughter were taken to a local hospital and later pronounced dead. Their names and ages have not been released. Helicopters rescue dozens off Alberta mountain. Dozens of people were flown off a mountain in Jasper National Park by helicopter on Monday afternoon after they were stranded by a power failure that stopped a tramway. About 160 people, including 10 staff, were stranded either on the top of Whistler's Mountain or on the tram car going up. Ski Marmot, the tram operator, then brought in 2 helicopters to get everyone off the mountain. The Jasper Sky Tram is described as the highest and longest aerial tramway in Canada. Paralyzed Broncos player may head home next week. A paralyzed teen from Airdrie, Alta, could be home next week after spending almost a month of physiotherapy at a hospital in Philadelphia. Ryan Strashnotsky says he will continue working on rehab and will either look for a job or go back to school. Ryan was injured in the crash between the Humboldt Broncos bus and a semi-trailer in April that claimed 16 lives. BLUESFEST bird nest being slowly RELOCATED. A tiny plover and her egg-filled nest are being moved ever so slowly from the site of an Ottawa music festival. The relocation of the killdeer and its 4 eggs to a nearby suitable habitat is expected to be completed Wednesday. Mark Monahan, the executive director of Bluesfest, says an official with license to handle migratory birds started work last evening to move the eggs, 1 meter at a time. The bird and its eggs enjoy protected status in Canada. Also in the news today, provincial and federal investments in flood hazard mapping projects will be announced in Fredericton. The Canadian Transportation Agency will hold a public consultation in Montreal on air passenger protection. Statistics Canada will release national tourism data for the first quarter. A pre-trial hearing will be held for Vice Admiral Mark Norman, who is charged with breach of trust over an alleged shipbuilding leak. Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation will release its Housing Market Insight Report. The Transportation Safety Board of Canada will release a report on an uncontrolled train incident in Vaughan. 2020. In 2016, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will attend several events in the Toronto area. Bank of Canada Governor Stephen Poloz will address the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce.